What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Sharpen the Public. As always, I'm your host, Deej, back again with my co-host, Andy, here to break down the conference championships. Andy, it's incredible how fast we've gotten here. Honestly, talking every week about the NFL and public betting trends and stuff, but we've made it. We've got 3 weeks now till the Super Bowl, because we've got this week, then a bye week, and then finally the Super Bowl. But I'm excited. It's gonna be a good weekend of the games. How have you been? How was your week?
It's good. Enjoyed watching all the games. I thought the divisional round delivered. I thought it was very entertaining.
I agree.
I think we were wrong to think that the Texans could hold that tight with the Ravens. A little bit of recency bias there, as well as those trends regarding both teams would either shit the bed or do well in regards to the one seeds coming off a rest, double rest for that matter. Did not align as closely as we thought it would, even though historically had done so well. So I think that's something to always offer, is that to take some of that with a grain of salt or just a little bit of caution with some of those trends, because I think there's especially helpful during playoff season, and round to round, of course, but not always something to live and die by. Sometimes you have to look at it at face value, and the Ravens are a fucking tank, and they are by far, I guess the Niners are fairly healthy, depending on how Debo turns out, but I mean, they're pretty healthy besides the running back situation.
Yeah. So I agree. I ended up switching. Not switching, but in my article, I didn't give it out Ravens minus 9.5, but my lean ended up being towards the Ravens, and I kind of regret that this throwing the Texans in to a teaser that we kind of forced. But I mean, that it is what it is. Not the end of the world. I ended up going 2-3 last week because of the teaser, but not too crazy. Again, that makes me 9-5 in the playoffs. So still doing all right. Excited to head into this conference championship week. Obviously, the games are going to be really tightly analyzed, spread wise. So we've got a lot to break down, and it's going to be fun. Obviously, this is going to be a shorter episode, prefacing because there's not much to talk about other than the 2 games and everything that we've kind of hit over the course of the season. We'll hit the public betting trends from last year as well as what happened last week, but yeah, I'm excited to get into it if you're ready, Andy.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So last week, the public went 1-3 ATS. So they went from 3-1 in 2022 to 1-3 ATS this year. So basically 500 over the last 2 years. Nothing too crazy, because the public didn't bet more than 65% on any of the games. So they ended up backing the Lions 52% of the bets, and then failing to cover in every other game.
Yeah, the Lions we had touched on before were a really solid team when the public was on them. So I think next time we got to take a closer look at that, on how the teams do with how the public and money, et cetera, are on them. Talk about that on the 2 games here, since we can go a little bit more in depth with just 2 games left in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. It's interesting when, especially like that's part of the reason that we track this, is to see that teams like the Lions are phenomenal when the public backs them, ATS wise, and the Lions just generally were very good ATS this season. So right now the Lions currently sit with 52% of the bets, but both of these games, I think it's really going to be publicly split. I don't think either side are going to have more than 60% of the tickets. If we look to last year, yeah, both games were under 65% of the bets in the conference championship week. So I don't expect there to be a pure public side in this week, but we'll see. Moving to totals. Totals went 3-1. Our public went 3-1 on the over, because they only bet overs. The public did not back an under. The same thing that happened last year, but obviously they went 0-4 last year because every game went under. One game went under, and that was the Packers and Niners game. That was an interesting one. I mean, clearly the Packers looked like they were going to have it in the bag, and the Jordan Love interception at the end gave Brock Purdy the chance, and the questions about Brock Purdy being just assistant quarterback and what the Niners actually are really prevalent right now. And I'm curious if that's going to impact a lot of people's bets. I'm sure it will, but I'm kind of on the flip side. I'm kind of seeing it as like, this is a bit of a Niners dip at this point in the season. What do you think?
Yeah, we can talk about it a little bit more when we get there, but my thoughts are right there with you, where I do feel that if I want to see if the line moves at all before I place my bet, but my first inclination was to take -7 with the Niners, because I do feel like this is a nice spot for them, especially at home. There is a lot of hype surrounding the Lions, especially after they've now gotten more playoff wins than they ever have before heading into this round. And I do think that it's an exciting time to be a Detroit Lions fan, but this is where it ends. I mean, once you guys went down and the Cowboys went down, I said it last week that now the Niners have a free pass to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I do have a gut feeling, and it's just being a sports fan, like, whenever there are these like surefire opportunities where you feel like the two best teams are going to make it to the championship in any sport, it doesn't happen. Like, somebody plays spoiler. I feel like the Chiefs are the more likely option here, and obviously the spread says that too, since it's a much tighter spread. But I just don't really feel that way with the Lions, where I'm right there with you, where I feel like even at 7, it does feel like this is a nice little buy low spot for the Niners because of the narrative right now, which is incredible to say heading into a conference championship that we feel this way.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it because there's a lot of angles to take it from, and props to the Lions for doing this well, but the spread says that, it might come to an end here. Going on with the trends, though, Public obviously did back the under, just so they went 3-1 on the over, so nothing there. Money percentage 2-2, sharp differential 3-1 ATS. So we've seen the sharp differential do pretty well in this postseason. They're now 6-4, and historically, I'll get to it when we talk about the 2022 trends, but they do really well in this conference championship, and they have done really well in the playoffs. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that, and we have some major sharp differential things showing as of right now in the public betting trends, because the money's severely on one side where the public's kind of split in both games. So we'll definitely touch on that. Money percentage on the over 1-1, sharp differential on the over 1-1, breaking the streak of 6-0 for the sharp differential on the totals, because they also went 0-2 backing the under, and money percentage went 0-2 back in the under. So again, not too much data there, but interesting nonetheless as we continue to aggregate data over the years that we do this. So still fun to see.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into it and see the actual levels that we see from a game-to-game standpoint.
Yeah. I know that you're curious, Andy, what happened last year. Not too much data, obviously, as well. Public went 1-1 in the conference championship weeks. Again, neither side had more than 65% of the bets. They actually backed the Eagles and ended up covering when the Eagles were 1.5-point favorites. And then the public backed the Chiefs, but the Chiefs did not. I'm sorry, the public actually backed the Bengals 63%, and the Chiefs obviously ended up winning that one. And it was a pick'em. Public went 0-1 on the total, or on the over, 1-0 on the under. Money percentage went 1-1, sharp differential 2-0. Like I said, very good in these later halves. And one game was 22% sharp differential toward the Eagles, and then the Chiefs had a 9% sharp differential last year. Money and sharps did not back the over, and then both games went under. So I don't have any trends to back this, Andy, but I really think that as we get later and later into the season, especially like the postseason, I should say, teams are really just tightening up, and I don't expect we're going to see many like flashing plays, and especially like I think Dan Campbell's going to be pretty aggressive, but I still think Kyle Shanahan's going to play fairly conservative and not really rush anything, and we're going to see a lot of unders happen because of that. And then look to the Chiefs and Ravens game, two phenomenal defenses. So obviously points to talk about, but that's just kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a valid point, especially in the Lions and Niners game when you see a total of 51 to talk about that, where if the Niners play their game, yeah, they'll be able to get points on the board like nobody else, but are the Lions actually going to be able to pull that off against a rather stout 49ers defense?
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. Is there anything you want to talk about before we just roll into the games? I know we're gonna try and hit some player props. We can talk about the Super Bowl a little bit after we get to the games. But yeah, is there anything you want to get to?
Do you buy into this conspiracy theory that the colors of the Super Bowl logo dictate which two teams are going to make it?
That's a great question.
If you do, we can just go ahead and say who's gonna make it, because
yeah, might as well.
Because we know that there is only one purple team left. Even though there are two red teams left, there is only one purple team left. So that means it has to be the Niners and the Ravens, which is everyone's prediction.
It would be insane.
Yeah, I think it's the third or fourth year in a row that would happen.
Yeah, I love the script discussions in the NFL because they're obviously nonsense, but it adds a lot of funny discourse talking about the NFL, because there are actually genuine people that believe that the NFL is scripted, and their specific bets that they're placing are losing because the game is scripted, which is just nonsense. These players make millions of dollars and are competitive as hell. They're not gonna let anything like that blow blow their chances of winning or whatever. So that's all nonsense. The colors thing is kind of crazy. Goodell might be doing some witchcraft or something, but next year I hope it's green. That's all I'll say.
And this is Super Bowl 58 that we're on, correct?
I honestly don't even know the numbers, but yeah,
I think this is Super Bowl 58. Yeah, that's correct. LVIII. I was trying to look up what the next Super Bowl logo was, if they've already generated it, because Aaron Rodgers was talking about it, and he was saying, God, I hope that the logo is dark green. But
yeah,
then it could mean you guys. That would mean you guys
I'm okay with dark green. I'm okay with dark green. Maybe a little bit of blue. We'll get a little bit of blue for you. Get the Colts in there. Who's also blue? Chargers, Lions.
Dude, but a dark blue, and like a royal blue and Kelly Green Super Bowl logo would look like shit. Let's be honest. It's not going to be a good looking logo.
Kelly Green's too obvious. Yeah, they got to be a little more subtle. Like the purple could have been the Texans. It could have been the Ravens, right? So they had to keep us thinking.
I don't even know if I talked to you for 2 weeks if the Colts had met the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
just be disgraceful texts. Yeah,
my dad would chirp you every day.
I'd get all the memes. So would Ethan. Oh my God. that one day it'll happen. In the next 80 years that we're living, it'll probably happen.
Yeah, we'll see.
But anyway, all right. Let's get into the games. Chiefs plus 3.5 in Baltimore. Total set at 44.5. This is obviously the AFC Championship game. Ravens coming off a demolishing win against the Texans, where we kind of leaned the Texans. Again, ended up leaning the Ravens, and that was mainly because I didn't think the Texans were going to be able to play the game that they wanted to play in the weather that there was, and we kind of saw that. Obviously, the Ravens defense really came home and played exactly how everyone expected them to come out. I think a big issue for them was the Texans, was their lack of ability to get the game going on the ground. 14 rushes for 38 yards is not going to win you a football game, especially against Baltimore, who had 230 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. So now talk about the Chiefs. The Chiefs obviously won a, not necessarily a shootout, but a very close one in Buffalo that went back and forth. Crazy ending with the Diggs miscatch and Josh Allen deciding to throw to the end zone when they needed 9 yards. I thought that was very weird. And then obviously the missed field goal. So the question becomes, can the Chiefs really beat this Ravens team? I'm leaning no, but it's Mahomes as an underdog. So it's like that whole script comes back, and it's like, how can we continuously back this guy when his back's turned? And, Kelsey's getting back 2 touchdowns in that game.
My instincts to Taylor Swift. Did you catch that?
I did. Everyone caught that. My instincts say Ravens. I saw him, no, he didn't. Instincts say Ravens. What do you think? We're gonna talk a lot about this one, I feel.
I also like the hook doesn't scare me, to be honest with you. Normally, like, the hook scares me away, and it seems like people are pretty split about it.
I didn't even say that. That's a good point. So
there's a couple of books that have the Chiefs at +4 now, but it's still 3.5. The bets are split 49% to the Chiefs, 51% to the Ravens as we record this Tuesday evening. And there are 61,000 bets already on this game. So, like, that is more than some games that we saw on Sundays throughout the week.
Yeah.
But 67% of the money is on the Ravens already. So the sharps are already on it, and the books don't care. They like their position from what it looks like, unless your books move to 4, which I think that's still negligible. I think that's just a ploy to get a little bit more action on the Chiefs. And that total has sat pretty tight to where it opened. It opened at 45. It's now at 44.5. But the public's loving the over 70% of the bets, but then for percentage of money, it's the same exact split, 49% to the over, 51% to the under. The same split for the money that we saw for the public on the spread. So there is a sharp edge on the under of 21% right now, but that'll move. That'll probably go down a tad, I imagine. I doubt that we're going to see. If we see sharp edges over 20-some% in the conference championships, I would be pretty surprised, just due to the sheer volume of bets that we're going to see.
There was last year. The Eagles had a 22% sharp differential last year, and they covered, obviously.
In the Super Bowl?
No, in the championship.
Oh, in the conference championship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously did not remember that, or else I wouldn't have said that.
It's okay. I did say it earlier. Obviously, you don't listen to me, but that's okay.
I'm taking notes as we go.
And he's taking minutes. No more notepad.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's why I look to the left this year instead of having to like write down like last year. It's all digital, which is nice.
I'm leaning under, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't really see. I'm not scared of the 3.5. I like that. You're seeing books move it to 4. The issue with the number is Lamar is like historically bad in his career above 3.5, but he's like really good under 3.5 as a favorite. So those question marks come into play. This year, the Ravens are 8-2 ATS between when they're favored under 7 points. So that's great. Obviously, I think this year Mahomes has been a dog twice and he's covered both games. So 2-0 ATS this year are the Ravens. Game wise, like I talked about the ground game for the Texans versus the Ravens. This is what's going to dominate here in the Chiefs game as well. The Chiefs defense we know is very good this year. It's one of the reasons that they've made it this far. Their rush defense is the most lacking area of their defense.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And we saw that with the Bills managing 182 yards on the ground last week against Kansas City. And now you're taking the best rush offense in football, number 1 rushing yards per attempt, number 1 in rushing yards, number 1 rushing DVOA, and you're putting up against this Chiefs defense that is, not so great against the run. And Lamar's going to be home. This is great coach versus great coach. There's no coaching mismatch here. There's 2 straight playoff games on the road. I think it's really tough for Mahomes. I really do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that my angle here, and I actually, let me back up. I'm going to add to your point. Like, the opponents only ran around 41% of the time against the Chiefs this season, and that ranks in the bottom third. But when you put that into perspective, right, a lot of teams are playing from behind, so they're not going to run the ball as often against the Chiefs. So that's why that number is down in the bottom third of the league. But when they have, to your point, teams have found success because that Chiefs defensive line and the linebackers have allowed 4.5 yards per rush, which is 8th worst in the league. So they're in the bottom quarter of rush yards allowed per play when the team runs the ball. Right now, Lamar's rush total is sitting around 64.5 from what I have. I don't know what you have on FanDuel or DraftKings.
Yeah, that's the same.
But it's pretty heavily juiced to the over. At least where I'm looking on the offshore books, I've got minus 143. But then you can do it on underdog, like without the juice, because you're doing it as a fantasy game. So you can do higher or lower on underdog for 64.5. So it takes the sportsbook juice out and allows you to put it into a fantasy lineup. So that's what I'm going to do, DJ, for my first play is putting Lamar Jackson into my underdog lineup. I think my fear is that by the time this podcast releases, that the line will shift a little bit and will go up. I assume that it'll probably go up 2-3 yards. They normally don't raise it by just 1 when it's juiced that heavily. I still like it all the way up to around 68, 69, 70 range. I probably won't take it if it's like 70.5. When you're looking at how he's performed this year, he hit it last game, but the prior to against Miami and San Fran, he did not. But then against Jacksonville, it's 97, the Rams 70, and then Houston last week he had 100 yards for 11 attempts. As the season has gone on, Lamar's attempts have gone up. So in 4 of the last 6, he's had 11 or more rushing attempts. And obviously they eased up a bit on the rushing attempts against San Fran and against Miami, where he had 7 and 6, because they were beating the brakes off of both those teams. He doesn't need to run the ball. They just hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah.
So with his rushing attempts trending up, I'm not going to lock it in yet, but his rushing attempts total is set at 10.5 on underdog. And on the offshore books I am looking at, it is set at 10.5 as well, but that's like a minus 110 type deal, which minus 110 in a prop menu is better than the usual minus 115 you see, but that's besides the point. So I lean the carries for him, but I also love the rushing yards. We saw James Cook continue to do really well as Josh Allen had 2 rushing touchdowns against the Chiefs. So, I mean, it's right there for the taking. They're not going to fix that overnight.
Yeah, my counterpoint was going to be like, you might think that Spagnuolo should be able to, stop Lamar and have some sort of plan because of how prolific he is running the ball. And that was going to be my counterpoint. And I thought the line was a little too high for Lamar. That's kind of why I took my prop a different direction. But Josh Allen ran 12 times for 72 yards. So and 2 touchdowns, like you said. So nothing really to be too scared about because Lamar is better at running the ball than Josh Allen. Conversely, my prop is also a rushing one, but I'm leaning more towards Gus Edwards. I think Justice Hill ended up getting a lot more of the yards last week, but that was because 42 yards came in not necessarily garbage time, but garbage time. 42 yards came in the fourth quarter for him. Edwards versus Justice Hill has been the question, obviously, the last several weeks for the Ravens, but Hill is more of the pass catching back, and in this game, I really think they're going to stick to the run game and give him more carries, and he should be able to hit the over 43.5. I think is very, very doable. I'm sorry, over 41.5 right now is the line. He's hit that. He didn't hit it last week against Houston, but obviously didn't really need to when you're up by 30 plus. He hit it against Miami and against Jacksonville. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for Gus Edwards, especially because they're going to run the ball so much in the lack of a rush defense for the Chiefs. Not to say that they're not good, because they're better than a lot of people, but they're definitely the worst side on the Chiefs defense. The last thing I want to say about this game is the Chiefs offense, because we've been really talking about the Ravens. On the other side of the ball, you've got the Chiefs, and now they have to travel twice, which they've never done in the Mahomes era. And I think that adds a dynamic. I think weather's meant to be fine, so that really won't play a factor. But at some point, I really think that their luck is going to come crashing down, and all of those drops that we saw at the beginning of the season and what plagued them throughout the regular season is going to come to fruition. This defense will have answers for Travis Kelce, whatever they have. They will have answers for Rashid Rice. It's the number 1 ranked DVOA, defensively DVOA in football this year. They are that good. They stopped the prolific Texans offense to 10 points. They held it to 10 points, and they are going to be able to. I don't want to definitively say it, but I think that they're going to be able to really handle anything that the Chiefs throw against them, and that's why I lean the under too. I think it'll be close, just in the nature of Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid and what they can do. But ultimately, I think the Ravens come out and probably win. My guess is 19-14.
Oh, that low! You're going that low scoring.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be low.
Wow. Yeah, that's like really fucking low.
I think it's gonna be really slow.
Hey, 19-14 covers the spread, whether you set it at 4 or 3.5. Am I right? So it's not a bad prediction. DJ, this Ravens defense is a turnover forcing machine. I mean, it's a testament to how good they've been. But they're getting an interception a game, which is tied for 5th best in the league, just behind their counterparts in the NFC Championship of the San Francisco 49ers at 1.3. They reigned first. Actually, the Chicago Bears were right behind, tied with them, which is kind of surprising.
It's insane.
So it's not always a testament to how good the defense is, right?
Bears futures next year. Take a win to the Super Bowl.
I thought we were doing that this year. But anywho, with them getting an interception a game, and also they have gotten, so that's 18 interceptions this year, as well as 15 forced fumbles for 33 total turnovers in their favor. I'm also going to be looking at some stuff like that, where I'm not necessarily saying, hey, just go ahead and rip Patrick Mahomes to throw a pick, especially in the playoffs, all that. But do you fade the hype when everyone's just making all these Brady comparisons and this defense is quite literally a brick wall? We saw the great system, the well-oiled machine, fully healthy of the San Francisco 49ers run into a wall against this team. We also saw the Colts beat this team in week 3. So I don't know. But we're definitely going to get the most locked-in version of the Ravens on defense. I have no doubts about that. But that is going to be another one that I'm leading and potentially looking to if it is a value adder to look at Patrick Mahomes to throw a pick, because they've got one. I mean, they are averaging an interception a game, and they are averaging 1.5 turnovers in general a game. Like, these guys are turnover machines. So I think there's definitely ways to take advantage of that, but it's also baked into a lot of stuff too. So just be cautious when you do it. But yeah, I lean Ravens spread 3.5. I lean Lamar Jackson over 10.5 rushing attempts. I also lean Patrick Mahomes throwing an interception. But what I will lock in is that Lamar Jackson higher than 64.5 rushing yards. And I'm going to do that with Underdog Fantasy. Be sure to use promo code Happy Hour when signing up for Underdog. It's a lot of fun. I am once again, DJ, going to have to fill out a tax form for Underdog because I've won so much money on them. I've already won $1,000 on them this year, which is awesome. And it's not just me flexing to the podcast. It is like a really fun platform to do drafts and stuff on. And I'm 23 days into the year, and my unit size is $20. So we're doing really well over here with the drafts as well as with the NFL futures that cashed for us. A lot of those season long bets that we did. It's just an overall really fun platform. So they've been a great partner to us. You guys have been great listeners to us as well. So why not give you a code where you can get 100% match on your first deposit when you sign up using our promo code Happy Hour. So be sure to take advantage of that as I use Lamar Jackson as my first leg for my fantasy lineup.
I love it. Great Underdog ad here, but also great plays from Andy. I love them. It's going to be a fun one. I feel like this one should have been in the evening. I think this is obviously going to be the more questionable matchup when it comes to, like, everyone more so expects the Lions to lose to the Niners. So I am curious why they put this one in the morning. Do you have any idea?
It's time zone factor, I'm sure.
Oh, good point.
It's probably just the time zone factor.
That's fair. That makes sense. Okay, moving to the one in the time zone, the one in Santa Clara. Lions traveling to San Francisco to play the Niners. 7 or 6.5 point underdogs are the Lions. 52% of the bets right now sitting in Detroit's favor. 72% of the money on the Lions. It's 24, giving them a 24% sharp differential. Total set at 51. And let me move the banner. There we go. Total set at 50.5 or 51 in some spots now. 56% of the bets on the over, 72% of the money on the over as well, giving that a 16% sharp differential. So notes there, Public's obviously split a lot of money coming out on the Lions and testing now. Some books are testing 6.5. Some I also saw were testing 7.5. So it's kind of like really what books want to do at, specifically in this spot. And then obviously the Public and money back in the over. Instincts are to back Lions for me, the Niners for me. I think, like we talked about in the beginning, I think this is a bit of a dip for them, a dip spot for them. You've got the Lions having to travel, which they haven't done well at all this year, especially playing outside, not necessarily in a dome, although the weather's supposed to be okay. So you got the Jared Goff not in a dome, trends to back you up if you want to back the Niners here. The good thing about the Lions defense is their rush defense. And the bad thing for the Lions is the Niners don't need to run the ball at all. And they can still get Christian McCaffrey involved because he's that good. And then the Lions secondary is the worst part of their team. I think they allowed, 6 worst passing yards in the league. Very bad against, their secondary is terrible. So I think Kyle Shanahan, like I said in the beginning, he's going to be very methodical, especially that's how Brock Purdy's been all year. Systematically finding his players, a West Coast offense style, if it's not there, move on. We'll figure out the next play. And then you're also saying that, the Lions defense being so good against the run, now you get Christian McCaffrey, and it's like, how much can you really stop despite how good you've been on the ground? So I think there's a lot of issues for the Lions defensively in this spot. Not to say that they can't score against the Niners defense, which obviously has been very good this year, but near the tail end of the year, the rushing defense kind of tailed off. And they obviously just allowed 18 carries and 100-plus yards to Aaron Jones. So you've got Jahmyr Gibbs and you got David Montgomery that are going to really be able to, hopefully for Detroit, make an impact. But at the end of the day, I think Shanahan and the Niners are going to force Jared Goff into tough positions and make him throw the ball into that elite secondary. And he's going to turnovers are going to happen, and the Niners are going to capitalize. I think I think they were just warming up, honestly, for this game.
I'm with you. I hate that we're taking both favorites. It feels like the simple thing to do, but it truly is kind of backing the dominant sides here, especially with the Niners team that has been so fantastic scoring the ball this season. The Niners have been really good scoring the ball in the red zone, whereas we've seen the Lions not so great in that area, especially when people get the ball into 20 yards and be in within. The Lions have been pretty leaky in those tight quarters, as well as like how the Lions fared against the pass. I mean, you touched on it, but we've touched on it the last 2 weeks now with the Lions, that when you throw the ball against them, that is where you find your success, and then running the ball is not really an option. I think the Niners have both those options readily available. I also think that there is the added element here of, sure, we have the Lions storyline, which is great, but the storyline that's not being talked about enough is that the Niners didn't even end up getting a legitimate chance against you guys last year. I think that they still would have lost. I still really like the Eagles in that spot last year, but I do feel like there is just as much of a chip on the Niners' shoulder because the Brock Purdy injury happened and they didn't get their fair shot to go for the Super Bowl last year. Now they get to go again. It's going to be dialed up. It's a lot easier defense to navigate than the Eagles' defense was to navigate last year. And they are going to be out for blood because they're likely going to be facing a matchup either in a Super Bowl revenge match against the Chiefs, because they lost to the Chiefs the last time they made it to the Super Bowl, or it'll be against the Ravens, which is also a Super Bowl rematch for them, but more so a rematch of Christmas Day. So I think that there's a lot of motivation for this team outside of just this whole Lions narrative that, oh my God, the Lions might make the Super Bowl. I'm not in on it. And I do feel that, as you highlighted, the matchups are so favorable that despite the bets being 50-50, I don't see why it is that way. I think the Niners is a clear move here.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think if people are going to be scared off, like the general betting public, not people that like really talk about it and bet a lot, are going to be scared off of the 7, be like, oh my God, the Lions being 7-point underdogs is a lot. And that's why you're going to see a lot of the public come in on the Lions. However, at the end of the day, this Niners team has showed us time and time again how dominant they were over this regular season. And I think the Packers game was not necessarily a fluke, but part of the, the injuries and the 2 weeks of rest, and just the fact that 1 seeds don't typically cover both games. And so they had to be on the back end of the Ravens absolutely dominating, and there you go. So they had to not cover, just so the trends made sense. So at the end of the day, it's going to be really, really tough for the Lions to come in and win, and that's why I would love the Niners in a teaser here. I think it's pretty simple to get them down to 1 or half a point, and even what is the Lions money line? I'm just curious.
It's probably plus 250, plus 265 range if I had to imagine.
Yeah, plus 280.
Plus 280. Yeah.
And it's only going up.
Yeah, they'll juice that up a tad bit more just to try to get more action on it, but you can't put it at the plus 300 range, I don't think, on a 7-point favorite. That's so rare to see it that high.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was just curious, but looking at like props and stuff, I know ESPN Bet has, I don't know if they still do, but they have an option to like not score a touchdown, because obviously all the books have 2-score touchdown props, but I think ESPN Bet's the only one that has not to score. Chris McCaffrey is currently minus 300 to score anytime touchdown. I would bet him not to score a touchdown, especially with this run defense that the Lions have, but it's not available in the books that I use, so I can't give that out, sadly. I wonder what the line would be.
Isn't that so dumb? When you can bet on them just to score a touchdown, but you can't bet the opposite side. It's so stupid. There's so many other silly props that are like that, where it only lets you go one way. And I think that shit is so dumb, because they know that they would get legitimate action on the other side and then they'd have to make a real line. But instead, on these anytime touchdown prop scores, you have 3 different 49ers players that are at close to even odds to score a touchdown, plus Christian McCaffrey,
which is insane,
at minus 300. It's not worth it. And it's also not good value for the actual bet that you're trying to place. So they are a little bit more honest with some of them in the Super Bowl. But like in games like this, as well as the regular season too, it's fucking bullshit the way that they structure some of this with their props.
And I love to bet like anytime touchdowns, but I really hate the juice, and I really don't I stick away from it when it comes to like single bets and straights. I really don't bet anytime. I'll throw it into parlay because it's fun, but like nothing too crazy when it comes to that.
Yeah, there's occasionally good values. Like I think, like you and I don't know if we had talked about it on the podcast, but we definitely had talked about it to each other about like Jordan Addison towards the beginning of the season to score touchdowns was good value, whereas like plus 160 or plus 170 at times, sometimes closer to plus 200. And that was like a good value thing because you knew he was going to get his chances and stuff like that. But then as the season goes along, they pick up on it and you can't bet it anymore. So by this point in the season, they're just going to rip everyone off because they know they're going to get value. People's going to be like, oh, yeah, I want George Kittle to score. Okay, here you go. Get it at plus 110. Thanks, buddy. Like that's such
when he scored how many touchdowns? Like that's a great example. How many touchdowns does George Kittle have this year?
I would vote no. I would say no. I think the one time that I played him in fantasy, he got 2. Besides that,
he's had 6 touchdowns this season, Andy. He's plus 110 to score a
2
touchdown.
against the Ravens, I think.
Yeah, so he had 6. That's 1 every 3 games, and now you're assuming that it's 50-50 that he's gonna score in the NFC Championship game. That's insane. And obviously against this Lions secondary, there's an opportunity, so you got to factor that in. But still, we're getting off topic. That's a whole discussion for the offseason.
It's
we can
still
talk about big and stuff.
For sure. It's still relevant, but totally agree. Do you have a prop you want to touch on? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I have one too.
I'm actually leaning towards Jahmyr Gibbs' under on receptions. I think he's hit it in the last 2 games. He was over, so his line is consistently set, 3.5 most of the time. But he didn't hit it last week, or he did hit it, against Tampa Bay. He did hit it against Los Angeles. I think the Niners are really going to focus on limiting him because he has such that playmaking ability. I think that they're really going to focus on preventing him from getting out in space and getting those long, wide screens to the secondary that is elite of the Niners. I think it's going to be really difficult for Jared Goff, especially if, the front 4 are causing a lot of pressure. So I think they're going to have to resort to running the ball to get it in Jahmyr Gibbs' hands. And even when he has gone over this prop, he usually hits it like 4 or 5. He hasn't gone over 4 since week 11 against Chicago. So yeah, I really like under 3.5 receptions for Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah. And to your point, like dating back to Chicago, it was to end the regular season. He only went over that 1 out of the final 6 games of the year. So it's trending that way. Of course, when was Demont out? I can't remember if Demont was back by then, but he did have a lot more rushing yards.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like against Denver, he had 100 rushing yards. Against Minnesota, he had 80. I mean, he had a great game against both of his division rivals. But yeah, and the Minnesota game obviously was pretty irrelevant to them. I think that's definitely fair game. My only concern would just be because they're going to have to throw the ball even more, and he'll be if the defense continues good coverage, Jahmyr Gibbs will be out there on the side as that 3rd or 4th option, probably the 3rd look after the first 2 are gone for Goff. But we've also seen Goff be one of the absolute worst quarterbacks under pressure, and he's going to be under pressure a ton. And I think that when that happens, he's going to be looking to Gibbs more if Gibbs is there available. So I would caution that risk that even though it's not necessarily plays that are going to benefit the offense, he could hit that over just as that outlet for Goff as he continues to panic because, again, he's one of the worst quarterbacks under pressure. Mm-hmm. To that point, though, he might completely miss him because he shifts the bet under pressure, but we'll see.
Yeah, that crossed my mind as well, but I thought that the line would move if that were to happen, and because people would expect that to happen, and because it's the same that it was in LA and Tampa Bay, that's kind of like, okay, there's a reason that it's the same. People are going to want to bet this over as well, so that's kind of why I'm on the converse line. It's also the overs plus 110, minus is juiced, so I like the under.
I'm not that great of a bettor, but I almost want to say I think you're giving the general bettor too much benefit of the doubt that they actually think about those things before placing the bet.
Really?
Yes. I'm serious. I feel like people just see that and they're like, oh yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's a passing back. Yeah, 3.5, easy. Over. So I don't mind the zag at all, especially like for Gibbs. I mean, you prefaced it too. You're like, I'm actually going to take his under. Like, that people are thinking about taking that over. That they're just
plus
thinking
110.
about doing it. So I think
people are like, oh, Jahmyr Gibbs over 3.5 receptions plus 110. Yes, please.
Oh, I didn't realize that it's juiced the over. Nice.
Yeah. Under's minus 146, so there's a lot of juice, but I'm okay with it.
Eat it. Eat the juice, baby. I'm going to go with a different route here. So one of my favorite props to do throughout the year, and I took it in the Niners-Ravens game, I think. If it wasn't that, then maybe it was the game before, was Brock Purdy's under passing attempts. And I was on this towards the end of last season, and it really was doing well as the season went along, where because the Niners would either get out to such big leads, plus they had McCaffrey to rely on, he wasn't passing a ton when they would set that total at 30.5 or the low 30s. It was consistently going under, where I think he only went over that typical 30.5 line that they would set in the New York Giants game in week 3. And then against Cincinnati at the end of October. And then he hit it in the Ravens game. Yeah, that's right, because I had the under in the Ravens game, and because he threw for 32 times to get him out of the hole. He threw for 39 times against Green Bay, DJ, which was by far his most this season. But that was only the third time that it's gone over that number of 30.5. It's sitting at 29.5 for this game. And it just feels so low. But I'm going to tell you why. And I think it's just because I feel like they're going to get out to that lead. And he's not going to have to throw it. And McCaffrey, as you had touched on, is going to be more dependable than people expect against such a stellar rushing defense. But instead of trying to figure out if he's going to throw, like how many times Purdy's going to throw, I'm going to keep it really simple. We're going to take Brock Purdy lower than half an interception against the Lions.
That's a good way to take that bet. I like that. Less opportunities, yeah.
Yeah. So there was a fun narrative around Purdy of like how he never throws interceptions, yada, yada, yada. And it was true. Like the first 5 weeks, he didn't throw any. And then he kind of slipped and he had 1, 2, 2 against in the Cleveland, Minnesota, Cincinnati stretch. Keep in mind, this was also the same time frame where Trent was out, where Debo was out. And I think McCaffrey was out for 1 or 2 games at that point too. So like he was panicking kind of when the system wasn't going his way. He slipped up.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that stretch, he's thrown 6 picks. 4 of them were in the Baltimore game. We all remember that. But then there was only 2 other games he threw. 1 pick against Seattle, and both of them were against Seattle. One against Seattle, and then another at Seattle. I really like this because I don't think that against such a inferior passing defense for the Lions that he's going to struggle that much. A lot of people have not struggled against this Lions team. Teams have not struggled to put points up against them as we've seen. I don't think he's going to have to take risks to try to get the lead back. They're going to have their game plan. He's going to be able to stick to the game plan, stick to the system. And I don't think that because I like the under on passing attempts, and that's something that I lean, I do think that he's still going to not throw it enough times to put an interception at risk for an otherwise really responsible and calculated quarterback.
Yeah, I like that too. I think that's a great way to take, not necessarily take his under, but they're not going to throw the ball more than they need to. And I'm sure all of the talks in between Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy this week have been take care of the football, because as long as they do that, they will win the game. That's how much better they are than the Lions. So that's all they care about. I'm
totally with you. DJ, the most legs you can put into an underdog lineup is 5, and we have given out 4. Do you have a fifth play to give out that you like in the prop market that we could potentially put into a fantasy lineup with underdog?
So we just say
20x payout.
Should we say fuck it and say a touchdown?
I don't mind it. You can do Mahomes rushing or receiving touchdown to 3x your payout.
Damn. I don't like that. I don't think he's going to be running one in.
I don't either. We've already got Lamar, though, so we can't take another Lamar.
Mine was going to be Gus Edwards to score a touchdown, because I was thinking about throwing him. I really think he's going to have a really good game. And he didn't score last week, right?
So you would have to. So if you did Gus Edwards on underdog, you can't do 2 of his in the same lineup. You can only do him one way. But you do get a 1.25x multiplier for throwing his rushing touchdown in there.
No, not worth it. I would. Let's see.
So we'll stick with 41.5 rushing yards.
I like David Montgomery's rushing over. He did not have a good game last week, and they're going to have to run the ball if they want to win. And his type of running will be much better, I think, against the Niners defense. So I like David Montgomery's over.
Yeah, there was some pretty funny rushing trends for this one where the Lions have averaged 6.8 yards per carry on rushes to the right side of the field in the last 4 weeks of the regular season. The Niners have allowed 5.6 yards per carry when defending on rushes to the right side during the final 4 weeks, tied for 7th worst in the NFL.
Damn.
For the Lions, that was 3rd best. I think it's kind of random, and I don't know how much they're going to force the right side. But then the Lions have been really good at yards after contact. So they have 2.9 yak, and then the Niners have allowed 2.8 yak, which is actually the worst in the NFL over the final 4 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, that's a lot of Amon-Ra and Jahmyr Gibbs, I would guess.
Well, no, this is yak to running backs.
Oh, so yards after
that's
carry.
big for Montgomery.
Yeah, that's good for Montgomery. Okay, cool. Yeah, I like his over 46.5.
You can get 43.5 on Underdog Fantasy. So
there you
go. We've got Lamar higher than 64.5 rushing yards. We've got Gus Edwards higher than 41.5 rushing yards. You just gave out David Montgomery higher than 43.5 rushing yards. I've got Brock Purdy not to throw an interception, so lower than half an interception. And then we got to throw in the Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to round out the play here at
lower than.
They don't have it on Underdog right now, but you can do 9.5 rushing attempts, or you can do lower than 75.5 rushing and receiving yards, 22.5 receiving yards, or 47.5 rushing yards.
Do lower.
I'm sure they'll have it up by the time the podcast releases.
Do lower than 22.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, as the secondary play. If you guys have the line for 3.5 receptions, then go with that. But 22.5 receiving yards, yeah, can't blame you there. $10 wins you 200 each. I think that's what I'm going to do.
I love it. Easy money.
Easy money.
Never been more free.
Yeah, that's a fun little conference championship weekend lineup to do out.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been awesome. I'm really excited to get into this. And then, so our plan will be, obviously, we just kind of finished up the conference championships. We'll probably have a short episode next week, just kind of talking about the season, talking about what we think the Super Bowl is going to be like. We'll hit a little bit, maybe of some player props and stuff, but not necessarily what we're betting for the Super Bowl. And then the week following will be Super Bowl discussion purely, finalizing everything, kind of bringing up more trends and stuff. Probably 2 smaller episodes as opposed to like one big one about the Super Bowl. But we'll talk about it and let you guys know on Twitter if anything else changes. As always, appreciate the support. It's been so much fun. Excited to get into the championships weeks, Andy. It's going to be great.
You know what I'm even more excited for, DJ, is the random ass Super Bowl props that we're about to get here in just a few days. It's going to be absolutely beautiful to just see not your regular couple hundred bets next to one game. There's going to be several different menus to explore, and that is the beauty of the Super Bowl betting season. So I can't wait to get into that. Can't wait to dive into this conference championship a little bit more with you as the week goes along. Looking forward to your article that comes out on happyhoursports.net every Sunday. So be sure to check that out.
If you're watching on YouTube, link in description, as always.
Yeah, man. A pleasure as always. Best of luck. Let's cash this underdog lineup. We haven't done one of these live on the pod before, so I think it's fun. And yeah, the boys bet better with beer.